Hi, thank you very much for joining us for this session. I am Suzanne Simon. I am the National Estuary Program Coastal Watersheds Grant Program Director, and I'm delighted to be having this conversation with John Brown, who is the medicine man for the Narragansett tribe. So we are going to be having a conversation about estuaries and the importance of estuaries, particularly to the Narragansett tribe. And with that, I welcome you, John.
Thank you, and I enjoy being invited to participate in your 10th annual summit. I thank the Restore American Estuaries and the Coastal States Organization for inviting us to speak here today on these important resources.
Great. Thank you for joining us. And I appreciate the virtual nature of this. Wish we could be in person, and I look forward to doing that someday. So can you talk a bit about the importance of estuaries to you and to the tribe and to your community in general?
I was going to say that we probably should combine the first two questions. The importance to the individual is minimal, except for survival. But more importantly, is the importance of these areas to the tribe itself. These areas are vital for the continuation of the Narragansett Indian tribe. For thousands and tens of thousands of years, we have lived in and around the bays and estuaries in our ancestral land, which include the estuaries and bays in Rhode Island. The Narragansett, the word Narragansett means people of the small bays and inlets. So it tells you kind of where our people were located and basically what we did. As we look forward into the world today, we see that the modern world has impacted these areas, and it's not like that you can replace them. It's not like replacing a wetland or replacing a forest. When they are gone, they are gone. The unique species of life that live in that area will too be changed. And as it changes, it will change our lives, and probably not for the better. So if we want to have a good life and we want life to continue with a richness in these areas, then we have to take the time to protect the areas. That is the thinking of the Narragansett tribe.
Now, in addition to protecting them, are there any plans underway to restore, or I guess, what are your aspirations? If you could have your way, if you will, to see these areas maybe go back to the thriving areas.
Human and men have attempted to break the circle of life in these areas. They have impacted these areas greatly with either living to a point of overabundance in the area, or to a point of where their pollution or their actions globally have affected these areas by the rise of the sea levels and so on and so forth. Therefore, it can only be humans and men that create the fixing or the correction to the problems that they have caused in these estuarine areas. I use the word men not from, how do I explain this? Not from a point of maleness, but from the point of the fact that males have been the primary problem. It is that type of thinking, the lack of non-continuance, the lack of acknowledgement of the natural world, that has helped the degradation of these fragile areas, these fragile ecosystems. So it is not complementary in any way when I use the word. And only those sources can, in their society and in their world, help fix the problem that has been created. If you don't live in an area, an overpopulated area, the circle of life will not be broken. Abundance will remain. If you are there and you leave like the native people were, we left much of what were the estuarine areas in their natural state. We respected them for what they were, and we understood that they provided for us as well as a plethora of other forms of life. That type of thinking doesn't seem to have carried forward in the modern world, when the modern world is only thinking about now. What are they thinking about when it comes to the next generation? We are here now, we won't always be. And in the next generation, they are going to be left with the irresponsibility of today.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges we're facing. I mean, I think not only as a whole community. So to that note, we all need to work together. What would you love our attendees, let's say they're inspired, they will be inspired, of course, after the summit, to kind of go out and do the right thing? What would you provide as recommendations or guidance for people, not only to work on their coasts, but how do they reach out to their perhaps tribes and their indigenous peoples in their neck of the woods?
It's a simple thing nowadays with modern communication. All you have to do is pick up a telephone, or, do what we're doing here by way of some sort of audio-visual media, to reach people, reach out to the tribal people, ask them what they think should be done in these areas to protect them. Call upon their tribal understanding and their tribal knowledge, what is left of it, and ask for that assistance. It's not that hard. The Narragansetts have always been willing and are standing by should that happen. We would like to see the balance restored, but we know that it's going to take more than ourselves. And perhaps if we join forces, rather than living our lives in the ivory towers that we've been taught to live our lives by, we might be able to save these fragile habitats. So that's what I would like to see. I'd like to see these things return back to the way they once were. I would like to see the legislative bodies, either from the state or from the federal government, take a serious look at what we're going to be left with if we don't move for protection and we don't educate the people around us. And the people of science that deal in these fields, I think that their primary responsibility will be to educate the people around them, to educate the communities, to educate the society about the need to protect these areas.
I'm on it.
Not simply for pleasure of vacations or places to go when one is bored, but to save the species of animals and the fish and the insects and the plants that are currently there.
Absolutely. And when you say the legislators, what sorts of programmatic or legislative priorities do you have, or I should say more correctly, the tribe has?
It would be just that, to speak with the federal legislators, because we deal primarily at the federal level, and to see if they have an initiative to place the proper legislation in place to protect these areas and to educate the general communities around them or that they represent.
Okay, so I find it fascinating to think about what it would look like, for all of us to work together towards that same, both legislative, programmatic, and on the ground, I guess, goals. I guess that's the easiest way of.
As a matter of course, most federal Indian tribes have relationship with just about every federal agency that's out there. We can establish relationships with private bodies and other public bodies as well. So the lifting is not so hard here. You would just have to put the programs in place that would allow for protection and would ask the tribes for the assistance that they could give with respect to their ancient way of doing things. The process for maybe replanting, the process for how to bring in the indigenous species of fish and birds that once lived there. Those things are not so hard for us to do. And it's not so hard for us to try to help in those areas.
So what do you think have been the stumbling blocks in the past?
Lack of communication, lack of contact. Until this summit, I've had very little contact with your organization. So if the organizations don't reach to us, because tribal governments are usually so busy doing everything else, basically we got our fingers in multiple places in the dike, it is tough for us to know where to reach and how to reach. We take the issues up. For instance, I am also the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Narragansett tribe. So when we see a permit coming through that is requesting to build in these areas or requesting to do work in these areas, we thoroughly review that. So we have that contact. We just don't have a contact with the agencies and with the entities that will deal specifically in these areas of protection. In the areas of historic preservation, the contact has been made. Maybe with EPA, the contact has been made to some level, but those programs have not been cooperative with other entities. They've just been what the tribes have taken on their own initiative or what has come to us by way of having to review somebody else's application. There has not been a great deal of co-joint planning.
Well, I certainly hope this is the first of many, many conversations, not only between our organizations, but hopefully this kicks off more meaningful discussions and thoughts on the part of our attendees. So on that note, I believe we're running up against our time limit. So I certainly appreciate everything that you've done in the past and all that you will continue to do, not only in terms of this summit right here, but also for all that you do for the continuing health and well-being of the Bay and the tribe and all those that depend on it. So thank you very much for your time, John, and I look forward to future conversations.
Indeed. I want to say this, there was a lot to convey in a short time to convey it. And since we are human beings and human beings are not perfect, let us hope that what we conveyed was to the point and to the mark.
Let us hope. Thank you again.
Bye-bye now.